Welcome everybody to my Zoho CRM Cadences masterclass. Now, Zoho Cadences is effectively Zoho CRM's email sequencing tool. They've given it this fancy name of Cadences. Sometimes it makes it a little bit more confusing than it needs to be, but it's effectively just their email sequencing tool with some other functionality built in as well that we'll get into. You guys, I think mostly have been on my webinars before, so we'll just do the quick introduction as usual. I'm Jake. I run a Zoho consultancy called Limitless IT Consultancy. I have been working in the Zoho world for about 7+ years now. I'm a Zoho certified CRM administrator and a developer. In fact, yesterday I actually did the exam to officially become a Zoho Analytics certified, whatever Zoho decide to call it this week as well. So that's all done. And Limitless supports clients from as small as sort of 4 users all the way up to 100 users plus, get the most out of their Zoho system. If there's anybody on this call that wants to know more about what we do at Limitless, if you just drop me a message or pop a thumbs up in, I will take that and we will contact you after this session. But for now, let's get straight into Zoho Cadences. Now, all of today, we're going to do this in our sandbox system. I'm going to try and make it as easy to follow as possible so you guys can go away after this and set up your own cadences. I'll also make the recording available as well because I know we're going to cover quite a lot in this session and sometimes it can be hard to keep up when we're doing everything in one go. Now, the first thing I'm going to bring up with cadences, and this is purely because Zoho changed it this week, is cadence access is based on your CRM subscription. So depending on what version of Zoho you're paying for will depend how much access to cadences you get. Now, in all honesty, no matter which version of Zoho you're on, you're unlikely to ever hit the maximum thresholds. You can see the details here. So even at the standard plan, you can create 20 different cadences per module. So that's 20 for leads and 20 for contacts and 20 for deals. So the reality of people hitting these limits is pretty low. And to be honest, until Zoho made the update this week where they increased the limit, I'd never hit it anyway. So it hadn't ever crossed my mind that there is a limit. I guess the only thing that's worth noting, and this you're more likely to probably run into with the standard plan, is the combined maximum follow-ups, and we'll get into building those out in a moment. But on the standard plan, your cadence can only have 18 follow-ups. Again, I think most cadences, particularly if you're a smaller organization, so you are just on that standard plan, I think that's still probably more than enough in all honesty. I certainly don't think I've ever built a cadence that's got anywhere near 70 follow-up actions. I can share this with you guys afterwards if you want to see this in more detail. But anyway, let's get into actually building our cadence and going through what a cadence is. Now, that's probably the best question to answer first is what is a cadence? Now, many of you on this call is likely to have not just Zoho CRM. You may be paying for, say, Zoho One, the whole bundle of applications. And as part of that, you may then have Zoho campaigns. You may then have Zoho marketing automation. So where does cadences fit into all of that? Now, I tend to think of cadences because most clients have both CRM and a marketing tool like campaigns or marketing automation. I tend to think of cadences more as a direct outreach or a direct follow-up tool. And by that, what I mean in simplest terms is when you're doing a marketing email, you create kind of a glossy marketing like email where you've got everything center aligned, you've got nice big images, you might have your logo and stuff like that in there. Most of the time, where I would use cadences is when I want the email to almost look like it's handwritten by one of the sales team, one of the business development team. And it's meant to feel a lot more personal. It's meant to feel like just a normal Outlook email, I guess. Now, that's not to say you can't do the glossy emails in cadences. We'll cover some of that today. It hasn't got quite the same functionality as what you could do in Zoho campaigns or Zoho marketing automation if you want to go down the glossy email route, which is why I think it tends to favor doing more kind of more, as I say, standard sort of Outlook like emails. And we'll go through and we'll build those together today. Now, to get started, we're going to need to decide where we're going to send our cadence emails from. So for the purposes of most of our demo today, we're going to send them to our leads. And the idea of what we're going to build today is we're going to build an email cadence that's going to take our cold prospects and effectively try and warm them up until they engage. And then we're going to take over and then we're going to go into sales mode. So to build our cadence, we're going to want to go into setup in Zoho CRM, which is just in the on the right hand side or the left hand side at the bottom. Used to be at the right hand side, and I used to say that so often in video calls and things like that. It's just a habit now to call it the right hand side, even though it's moved. And you're going to want to search for cadences. Now, one thing to note is depending on your access to Zoho, you might not have access to the cadence settings. However, there is now, and this is another one of those updates Zoho rolled out this week. If you're an organization admin and you want to give another user access to cadences, Zoho have just improved the way that works. So previously, to give someone access to cadences, you would have to give them access to be able to manage all of your organization's workflows. Zoho has now split that out. So if I just show you here, I've gone into setup, I've gone into profiles, and I can see my different security profiles. And if I go into, I've just got one called demo here. If I scroll down, if I want to give people with the demo profile access, I can scroll down and I just need to make sure I select that they've got the ability to enroll people into cadences. Previously, as I said, to do anything with cadences, they would have to have access to be able to do automations, which isn't always what we want. So it just gives us a little bit more flexibility in there. Now, if we carry on and create our cadence, just so we've covered that bit off quickly. Perfect. So we're in our cadence view now. You can see I've got a demo one here. I'll delete this so we're all starting at the same point and we'll start from 0. So first thing we're going to do is hit create cadence. At this point, it's going to ask us to give us a name. So I'm going to call this manual cadence, and all will become clear in a moment. And we're going to select our module. Now, this module selection is really, really important. Depending on what module you select, that's the only place you can use this cadence. What you can't do right now is have a cadence that spans between leads and the contacts module. It's all dependent on this module. So in our case, because we want to create like a nurturing sequence for our leads, we want to select the leads module. And then we're going to select who is this for? And we've got two options here. This is kind of a badly named field, I think, for Zoho. What this actually means is how are we going to get people into this cadence? And there's two options for that. One, we can manually enroll leads, and that's what we'll do first. And the second option is to enroll leads automatically based on them being in a custom view. Now we're going to do the manual option first, but we will come back to that custom view option afterwards. So we're going to select that and hit next. And that's then going to bring us up into this nice kind of almost like Trello, Kanban type view where you can see your different columns. Now we have to start with what our initial follow-up action is. So we're going to go in and add follow-up, and you'll see we get 4 options in here. That WhatsApp option will only show if you've configured WhatsApp Business, and we're going to come back to that a little bit later so I can show you some of the options around WhatsApp, because that's a pretty new, in fact, that functionality was only added Monday, so really well timed this webinar because it's just had quite a lot of new features added to it, Cadences. So we're going to go in for email first, and the first thing we're going to do is to do this immediately after enrollment. If we want, we can go in and put a delay. So the reason you might put a delay here is, let's say you want to trigger this after somebody's entered a web form. Maybe to make it look a bit natural, instead of the email going immediately after they filled in the web form, you want it to go maybe 2 hours after they filled in the web form. The idea being then that the end person receives the email, instead of them knowing, oh, that's an automated email because I filled in that form, it looks a little bit more personal because actually there's been a little bit of a time delay there. So we're going to do it, we'll keep it immediate for just the demo purposes, because otherwise we'll all be waiting around an hour when we want to see this in practice. We're going to give this a name, and we're just going to call it email 1, and we're going to choose our recipients. And what you'll see when I click on this is going to bring up all the email fields from my leads module. So within my leads module, I have email and secondary email. So this is who's going to get this. So I'm going to choose the email field is what we're going to use. Finally, we've got to select our email template. Now, depending on if you're already using the email functionality in Zoho, you may already see templates in here. If you don't, you can create a new template, and we'll do that together now to give you some examples of how this works. So when I create a template, it brings me to this template gallery, and there's a couple of options in here. There's a blank template, there's a couple of different layouts, and if I scroll down, there's some other sort of more branded looking emails in here. They're okay. The reality of it is you probably won't use them for your business because they just don't match your style. But it's sometimes good for a little bit of inspiration on what you might want your email to look like. That said, we've said the way we want our email to work is we want it to look like a normal, natural email that's been sent by a real person through an email client. Now, you might be forgiven to think that we're going to click blank here, but we're not. The reason we're not going to click blank is if we select blank, and in fact, I'm going to show you, if we select blank, what we get is like a fancy email editor. And when we do that, we can add in columns and buttons and all sorts of things, and we can turn it into a sort of glossy marketing email. The problem with this is even if I just put text in this email, when I send it, this text will be in a white column center aligned in the screen. So it won't look like a normal email that somebody sent. So what we're going to do instead, and it sounds scary, but I promise you it's not, is when we hit create template, we're going to go into insert HTML or plain text, and we're going to select that button up in the corner. That removes all of the options that we had to add fancy buttons and columns and things like that, and it just gives us a normal email editor. Now, if you are a web designer and you do know what you're doing with HTML, you can at this stage insert HTML and you can make this look however you want. But in our case, again, we just want it to look like a handwritten email. So to do that, because I don't want to write an email out in front of you, we're going to quickly refer to ChatGPT and we're going to ask it to write a cold outreach email to a prospect of limitless IT consultancy. Turns out I cannot type when I'm sharing my screen. So here we go. This is going to quickly put us together an email that we'll use. So we're going to copy this. We're going to assume it's the best written email ever. And if any of you after this call get a copy of this email, you'll know it's because I think it is. And then we're going to go in and we're going to fill in where it's suggested we do mail merges. I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to remove it. And if I do the little hashtag, that will then pop up this little menu. And this is how I can merge things into my email template. So in this case, I want to merge in the first name. The rest of this, we don't want all those capitals, so let's get rid of that. We'll just get rid of the bold. We're going to get rid of these empty lines. Grab a quick time slot. We might want to do that, so maybe we'll put in a calendar link. So let's just pretend that this is my calendar link. We'll pop that in there. And then we have our first email template. Did this give us a subject? Yeah, it did. So let's use our subject line that ChatGPT has suggested as well. We'll pop that in there. And we'll call this email 1. Hit save. We're going to save this into a folder. Now, by default, if you've not created templates before, you'll probably only have the public email templates folder. If you save it in that folder, everybody will have access to that email template. But you can also create additional folders that are private to you, are shared with all users or just selected users. In our case, we'll share with all users and we will call this our Cadence emails. Let's help if I can get that right. There we go. And then we have our first email template in place. I'm then going to go back in here and I'm just going to go back into this tab and it's going to say refresh to see changes. And then I can see my Cadence email. So now that I've done that, I can now choose who the email is going to be sent from. Now, by default, it's going to try and send it from your user's email, the person who's creating the Cadence. What I'd recommend though is in most cases, you probably want it to be the record owner's email. The reason for this is then when you have your leads come in and you assign those leads out based on your sales team or your SDR or your marketing team's best attributes. So maybe you've got somebody that specifically covers this industry. You're going to assign that lead to them. So then you want the emails in the Cadence to come from that sales rep opposed to a generic sales email. So I'm going to choose record owner's email. And then the reply to, I'm also going to keep as the record owner's email, but I could, if I wanted to, have this come back to a different email address if I wanted. If I had set up organization emails, for example, I could have the reply to address be like a sales@limitless email box or something like that. Once we're happy, we're going to hit save. And then we have the first step of our Cadence all in place. Now, from here, we can now start building out the rest of the sequence. Does that all make sense so far? Is everybody following whilst I have a quick sip of my cup of tea? Yeah, perfect. Okay, that is good. Yeah, we've got some thumbs up. We've had no questions so far, so either everybody, this is the best demo ever, or it's late on a Friday and everyone's ready for the weekend. We'll find out. Okay, so we'll move on to our follow-up number 2. And this is where we can then click this plus button. So this follow-up 2 will be based on the actions of follow-up 1. And when I click on this, again, I get my same options here. So what do I want to do for follow-up 2? Do I want to do an email, a task, a call, or a WhatsApp? Well, we're going to do another email in the first instance. So we're going to select email. But this time, when we do the do this action, you'll see we've got different options. So we've again got the immediately drop down for our time period. But then we've got after the previous email is, and then we've got a drop down of actions. So we can say, okay, immediately after the previous email is opened, we then want to do something. Or immediately after the previous email is replied to, we want to do something else. So this is where we start taking our one email and splitting up the chain into different actions. Now, the way I like to do this to keep it simple is I'm going to use the sent action first. Now, Zoho uses this as a sent action, but if we look at our list here, effectively the sent action is the nothing's happened action, I guess, because as soon as something's opened, it would move to opened. As soon as something's clicked, it's going to move to clicked. Sent is kind of the default action that the email was sent, but nothing else has happened since. So I'm going to use that as my action here, and I'm going to change the do this. I'm going to change this to 14 business days, so 2 weeks. Or in fact, actually, no, I just want days because otherwise that's more than 2 weeks. So 14 days after the previous email is sent. I'm going to call this email to. I'm going to choose my recipients. So again, I'm going to choose my email. I'm going to explain more about this bit in a minute as well. And then I'm going to select my template. We now need to create another template because we've used our email 1 template. So I'm going to go in and create a new template. Again, we're going to go into insert HTML or plain text. And then we're going to scroll across here and we're going to ask ChatGPT to create a follow-up email for those that don't open the first email. And hopefully it'll give us something quite nice. Here we go. It's going to put something together for us. And we're just going to copy this text as well. And we're going to pop this in here as well. You can all see what you're going to get after today's call then, and you're all going to go instantly into this sequence. Although sadly, this is actually in our test system and not in our real system, so I'll need to do the work twice here. Once again, we're going to go in and we're going to do a merge. So we're going to remove the merge it had in here. We're going to do a hash, and then we're going to go in and select first name. This particular template, Zoho's also popped in the prospect company's name as well. So I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to find the company name as well. Now, a word of warning here, because sometimes this does happen, is if you're doing any kind of autofills like this, where you're merging in fields from the lead record, make sure you've got that field as required so you know that there's data in there. Otherwise, what will happen is effectively you'll end up with just a blank space in your email and it just doesn't read right. So anytime you're going to merge in data, just make sure that field is definitely in there. We'll just leave that empty for now because we're not too worried about the booking link. Did it give us another email? Yeah. Any thoughts on unlocking Zoho's full potential? I should take some notes on this. And we're going to call this email 2. And again, we're going to hit save. I'm going to hit save now. I'm going to save it into our Cadences folder. Now, when we go back here, we're going to refresh to see changes. And we're going to select email 2. And again, we want that to go from the lead owner. So I'm going to change it to record owner's email and hit save. Now, the reason I always do this top action first, I do the sent after first, is because this is kind of like the default path, the way I think about it. So if we send email 1 and then nothing else happens for 2 weeks, email 2 is then going to go out. Underneath that, this is where I then add my branches. So I'm now going to go back into email, and this time I'm going to do, if the email is opened, I'm going to say that maybe we do 7 days after the email is opened. Well, let's do 3 days after the email is opened. I'm going to pop in my email again. And in this case, I'm just going to send the same template just to save us having to create yet another one. And again, I'm going to send it from my record owner. But what's happening now is I've now got effectively branched this path. So email 1 goes out. If nothing happens for 14 days other than the email being sent, email 2 is going to go. However, if the person opens our email, I'm actually then going to send email 2 after just 3 days because actually they've opened the email, they look like they're engaged. Now, I will add a small caveat to this that with all email systems, opens and clicks are a little bit more like an art than a science. I'm sure many of you have iPhones. One of the things Apple has done for quite a long time now is whenever you get an email, it scans that email before it puts it in your mailbox to make sure there's nothing in there nefarious. The downside of that is Apple effectively reports everything as opened. So there's some caveats to the way that I would use these opens. Clicks is probably slightly more reliable than opens, but it's still, again, it's not a perfect science. So if you're sitting and you're doing this, don't expect it to literally line up one-to-one. If you got everyone in a room and did this in practice, there's going to be some differences just based on how different email software is. And actually, if you're working with corporate clients, quite often corporate VPNs will also scan emails before they're delivered to recipients' email boxes. And again, that can be tracked as an open depending on how that software works. So just something to be mindful of. So we've got email 1, we've got email 2 if nothing happens, and then they've called it email 3 here if it's opened. I'm going to add one more action in here, and we're going to go off into a different path for a bit, and we're going to go and create a task this time. So this time I'm going to do immediately after the previous email is clicked. So if somebody actually clicks our email, so they seem like they're really, really engaged, we want to do something immediately. So I'm going to go in. I'm then going to give the task a name. So I'm going to call this call lead as they have clicked on Cadence email. I can give that a due date. I'm going to say it's due in 1 business day because we don't want to be super creepy and call them immediately after they've clicked. We can then add our status, so it's going to be not started. We can put in a priority. We can assign it to. I'd recommend again leaving this empty because if you leave it empty, it actually defaults it to the record owner. We're going to want to tick to notify assignees because we want the person to know that a task has been created for them. And if we want, we can also set up reminders, but in our case, we're just going to notify. Final thing on here, because it's helpfully reminded me at the bottom, is we can also use our same hash functionality that we use when we're creating our template to merge things into our task as well. So instead of saying call lead, we could actually change this to hash, and then we could do first name, last name if we wanted to. And then that will create a task that says call first name, last name as they've clicked on Cadence. We'll hit save. And then I'm going to say for now, that is all of our follow-up 2. Now, just before we move on to follow-up 3, just a little bit more explanation of the way this works. Effectively, only one action from follow-up 2 or follow-up 3 or follow-up 4 will ever happen. So only one thing in each column will ever happen, and it's whatever happens first. So if somebody clicks after 2 days, that's then going to trigger this action immediately, and they will then continue off down that tree. However, if they don't do anything for 14 days, they'll then go down this tree. If after, say, 30 days, they then click on email 1, this call won't trigger because they've already left that follow-up stage. Now, I'll give you some workarounds to that in future that gives you a little bit more flexibility as well. But that's one of the things to bear in mind is it's only one action per column right now. I can see we've just got a couple of questions. So let's take a pause to have a look at those. We've got a couple of questions from Mark. Can you insert the Sales IQ code into the email template? Good question. Yes, I believe you would be able to because you would put it in the footer like you do in other emails anyway. Does that stop the first follow-up email from being sent? Not sure your question there. I don't know whether I've answered that question, Mark. If you could clarify, I'm happy to answer that. And then a question from Helen has come in. If a record/customer is removed from the Cadence via the custom view or whatever, Will that stop the follow-up actions? I'm only asking because autoresponders are being phased out, with cadences being the replacement, and we use these to send regular emails. Okay, Helen, I'm going to come back to your answer because I'm going to cover that a little bit later, how you get people out of the cadence, but good question. I think I can pin this question, can't I? So I'm going to put you as a high priority question. And Mark, you've confirmed I've answered your question, which is great. Okay, so we're going to go back into building our cadence, and in just a moment, we're actually going to go in and we'll show you this live as well with a lead. So we've got email 1, we've got email 2, we've got email 3, we've got our call in here. Now, if I continue off through here, I can go off and then I can create another email. And again, I'm probably going to do the same thing here for column 3. I'm going to say, oh, if it's sent, and I'm going to do 14 days, because effectively, again, I'm doing my default action. So what happens if nothing happens? Again, my recipient's going to be the lead. I'm going to create a new template again. And you're kind of getting the gist of this now. You can see how it's kind of repetitive. Create another email. Strongly recommend using AI to help you get some of this together. Obviously, you'll probably want to tweak it to get the tone and the company language exactly right, but it's so good for giving you a starting point. So again, I'm going to put my merge in there, and I'll leave everything else in there as it is. Now we'll call this, take our subject. Should I close the loop on this? There we go. I should have done this in my real system. I'd have a cadence all up and running then. We'll call this email 3. We're going to do that, and then we are going to hit save now. Again, we're going to put this into the email cadence folder. Good question. I can see Courtney's asked on here, do you need to add unsubscribed options to these email templates? Very good question. Now, I am not an email privacy expert, so I'm not going to get too much into the weeds of this, other than to say you can add the unsubscribe link when you go into here. You can go in and I'll remind myself how to do it. It's actually up here, isn't it? If I hit the insert link, I can insert unsubscribe link, and I can insert the default unsubscribe link, and that will insert the unsubscribe link. When someone clicks that, that would remove them from the cadence. In terms of whether you have to or not, I would say consult somebody that's an expert on that. There's generally wiggle room around the idea of legitimate interest, but I tend to err on the side of caution and would rather give somebody an unsubscribe link, because ultimately, if they really don't want to hear from me, it's probably best to remove them from that email cadence. But that's how you do it. Again, in terms of the legality of which way to do it, I will leave that to you to talk to somebody who's an expert on email marketing for that. Hopefully that's helpful, Courtney. Sorry not to give you anything more specific. So we have our template there. I'm going to save that. That was just going to ask me to add a version to add a comment to what I've changed. So I'm going to do unsub because I've added the unsubscribe link. Again, I'm going to go back to my cadence. I'm going to select email 3. Again, I'm going to send this from the record owner email. And then you can see I've then got into my third branch. Now, if I just swipe across the back to our limit, the combined maximum follow-ups, this is what we're getting into with those combined maximum follow-ups. So as we're going through here, each one of these, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 follow-ups. So you can see if you start branching these out, you're going to end up with quite a lot of additional branches. So that's where you might end up hitting that follow-up limit. Mainly if you're on that standard plan. I think once you're on professional and enterprise, it's very unlikely, but on that standard, there is more of a chance you're going to run into that. Okay, I think we've kind of got the idea of how the emails work here. So I'm going to not add any more emails in here, but I do want to go down into my call here, and I want to add a follow-up action here. So this time after my call, I'm actually going to add an email follow-up. But this time my actions are different. So instead of it being based on the email action, it's based on the call action. So actually what I can do is say, okay, immediately after a call is completed, I then want to follow. Then want to send X email, because maybe that's an email that says, hey, thanks for your time on the call. Here's how we can book a longer meeting, whatever that might be. It gives you a little bit of flexibility. But as I say, the cadence adjusts what the follow-up actions are based on what the previous step is. So in our case, I'm going to go in there and I'm just going to select email 3. In real world, these will almost certainly be different email templates because you're not going to send somebody that's not responded to you the same thing you've just had a call, but just to start giving you an idea of what this looks like. Now that we've got a little bit of a sequence in place, we'll just add one more step here just to clean it up a little bit. We'll just say 3 days after open, we're going to send email 3. Let's do that. There we go. Perfect. There we go. We've got all of that in there. Perfect. Now, one thing to note on this, and this sounds really obvious, but I've run into it with a client in the past. If you're doing anything like we've got here, where it's based on someone clicking, you actually have to have a link in the email. If you do the click thing and there's no link in your initial email, the click would never be triggered because there's nothing for them to actually click. Sounds really obvious, but sometimes it's one of those things that people just forget when they're setting these things up, so it's worth noting. Okay, so we've got our cadence all in place, so we're going to publish this cadence, and that is now running and saved, but I can see there's nobody in that cadence just yet. So what we're going to do is I'm going to close some of these tabs I don't need. I'm going to switch into my leads module, and we're going to create ourselves a brand new lead. I'm going to call this lead Jake Harris. It's going to be a cold prospect. The company's going to be limitless. The contact method's going to be email. Now, just so we can do this and you can see the outcome, what I'm going to do, and this is a tip for anyone that needs to do testing regularly. If you just Google temp mail, I always use this one here that's temp-mail.org. And what it will do is it's full of ads and looks a bit ugly, but more importantly, it will generate you a temporary email address that you can use for testing purposes. And it's really helpful when you're testing cadences or other kind of tools. So I'm going to copy this email address. I'm going to go into my lead and pop it into my lead and hit save. And that's then created my lead. Now you can see in my related lists, I can see cadences. Now, if you haven't got any cadences set up, you may not see the option there because it might not be enabled. So that's one thing to bear in mind if you just don't see that. Now I've got my cadences, so I'm now going to enroll this person in my cadence. So I'm going to click in. I'm going to enroll him into the manual cadence, and I'm going to hit enroll. And the leads have successfully been enrolled in one cadence. Okay, I've got it. So it's going to give me the cadence name, when they started, who it was enrolled by, the status, and a couple of other bits of information in there as well. Now, if I refresh, what we'll probably also see is if I go down to the email module, you can now see the first email has been sent as well. So I can see that down here in my emails, and it came from the cadence. Now, if I go to the timeline view, what I should see is if I click onto timeline, you'll see on the side of this view upcoming actions. If I click that, you can see in 2 weeks' time, email 2 is going to send. So if nothing happens, in 2 weeks' time, that email is going to send. And I can see that here. I can see exactly what time it's going to send as well. So it's quite a nice little preview. Now, if I go into temp mail, you'll see in my temporary inbox here, I've got that there. It looks like ChatGPT just added a little format in there that we'd need to clean up. It's just added like a paragraph tag in there as well, but that's something we could clean up. But I can go in, I can see my email there quite nicely. The only issue we've got, I've just realized, is that our URL there isn't clickable. So we just need to solve that, which we can do in just a second. But what that will now mean is it may take a second, but we should also see if I go into here, that this is going to be now viewed as opened, which we can see. So if I now go into my timeline, what you'll now see is this is now actually going to be sent on the 22nd of September. So instead of the 3rd of August, 3rd of October, which it was, it's now moved forward because we've now opened that email. So it's changed what the next action is going to be. We also have some lead scoring set up in here as well. So because we've gone in and opened the email, that's actually increased our lead score. That's a topic for another video. If people are interested in that, we can certainly do a separate webinar on that as well. So if I go back into here now, I'm just going to go in, and I think we just need to fix our template here because I want to add that link to be clickable because I want to show you how it's going to look with our tasks as well. So to do that, what I'm going to do is go back into settings, but instead of going into our cadence, I'm actually going to search for templates, and I'm going to go into our email templates. And then I'm just going to find email 1. I'm going to edit email 1. First of all, I'm going to fix the subject because I accidentally copied that formatting. And then where we've got this URL here, I'm just going to copy that. And I should have done this when I pasted it. I'm just going to make it an actual link, insert it. And in fact, you can see here, if we have connected Sales IQ, we can actually include a Sales IQ identifier on here as well. So that might come back to the question Mark asked a little bit earlier. We can hit save and hit save. We're just going to call this fix link. The reason it asks you for a comment whenever you update the version of your email is if I click into the email, I can see analytics for that email. So I can see open, click, and versions. And the idea is, as I'm updating this, it keeps track of the open and click rate for each version so you can see how it's improved. There's not enough data in here for it to really tell us very much because I've only done it for that one account. But that's why it asked you for that change, so you can actually see what that's impacted to your email. Okay, so we've just updated that. So let's just quickly create a new lead and put him into the Cadence. So let's create a, oh, not a deal. Let's create a lead. And we'll call this Jake Harris 2. Call it Limitless 2. And we're going to say preferred contact method. If you've not seen this before, it's my favorite things to set up within any modules, because sometimes when you talk to people, they don't always have an email, or they don't always want to give you an email, they just want to give you a phone. What this does is, based on the option I select, it can make these different fields mandatory, which is really helpful. I'm going to go with email. I'm just going to go back into my temp mail account and I'm going to hit delete this address. So what that will do is it'll actually generate a new email address, so then I can do a new test with that new email address. So again, it just saves me having to create a million Outlook accounts or something like that. So I'm going to go in, pop that in there. And then again, we're going to go into the Cadence. We're going to enroll, and we're going to select enroll Cadence. And again, what we'll see in just a minute when we refresh is that email should go out. There we go. We can see that has gone. That is now clickable, which is great news. You can see currently the status of the email is sent. And again, if I go into my timeline, you can see the next action is the 3rd of October. If I now go into my temporary inbox and refresh, in fact, it's already there, so I didn't need to refresh. Give it a moment. It's not the fastest thing in the world, this, but I think obviously because it's generating emails on the fly. So we can now see this. If I go back in here and have a look, what we should see now is that email is opened, which it hasn't updated just yet. As I say, sometimes it takes a second. You've seen previously that it did update. So if we just refresh again, hopefully that'll come through. There we go, that's now updated to opened. If I mouse over it, it gives me the time. And if I go into my timeline, you can see the next action is the 22nd now, because it's 3 days from today. But we're going to take it one step further, because we're actually going to click the link. And in our case, that just opens the CRM because that's the link we put in there. But what this should now do, if everything is working, which I hope it is in just a moment, this will update to clicked, and then we should then see a task generated for us to follow up with this lead. As I say, sometimes it takes a minute or two to update. So to buy myself some time, I'm going to go into our leads here and just show you one other way we can do this. If you've got multiple leads that you want to enroll into a Cadence, you can select multiple at a time. And from the actions menu, you can go into Cadences, enroll, and you can add people this way as well. So if I go in here, I can add all of these to the Cadence, hit enroll, and all 4 of those will now be added to the Cadence. If you're wondering, by the way, this is all fake data that's generated via a fake data API so that we can test within our system. So let's just go back into here. It's not quite come through yet. Give it a moment. One of the downsides of using the test mailbox is temp mailboxes, sometimes it does kind of do some weird stuff. So hopefully that will come through and open up. Let's just double check. We'll do some live debugging for a moment because I would have expected that to have come through already. Let's just go into our email configuration in settings and just make sure email intelligence is all enabled, which it is. So in theory, we should be all good. It might just take a couple of minutes for that to come through. Okay, whilst that's coming through, let's go back into our Cadence and let's talk about the other type of Cadence options that we have. So I'm going to go into settings again. I'm going to go into Cadences and I'm going to create a new Cadence. This time I'm going to call it automatic. I'm going to select my module, and again we're going to do leads, and this time we're going to do leads in a custom view. If I'd selected contacts, it would give me contacts in a custom view. If I selected deals, it would give me deals in a custom view. You get the idea. Now, what I can do here is when leads are added to a custom view, automatically enroll them into this cadence. Now, what I can do to do that is if I go into my leads module, let's just open it as a new tab. Up in the top bar here, I've got all leads currently as my current custom view. But I can go in here and add additional custom views. And effectively, a custom view, if you've not used it before, is kind of like when you're in Excel and you create filters for your different columns of data. A custom view is the same thing. So I'm going to call this Cadence. I'm then going to go in. Oh, I really can't spell today. I'm then going to go in and I'm going to say this cadence should include anybody where the lead status is cold prospect, the owner is me, and where in fact I could do logged in user if I want it to be dynamic, but I'm just going to select my user, and where city is London. So this is going to be my cadence of cold prospects in London. If I hit save, that has given me exactly 0. So I clearly need to do a better job prospecting in London. Let's maybe change it to country and have a look at United Kingdom. Hit save. There we go. So we have our 14 cold prospects that are owned by me in the United Kingdom. So what I'm then going to do is I'm going to go into here and I'll probably just need to refresh this just because I've just created that view. So let's just do that again. I'm going to say leads in a custom view, cadence, and enroll new leads when they enter. And when I get to enroll, I've then got this option of when they meet the custom view criteria, or I can add a delay. I normally just do the top one because you can always do the delay within the email sequence itself. I'm going to hit that. I'm going to hit next. And then we're into the normal builder again. So I'm going to go into my email. I'm just going to use the template that we've already used, but the setup here is exactly the same as it was previously. Again, I'm going to have it sent from the record owner. I'm going to hit save. We can then do our follow-up too. We get exactly the same options as when we created the cadence manually. So I'm going to do if it's sent after 14 days. So again, that's going to be our default if nothing else happens. We're then going to send email to. And again, we're going to send that from the record owner. Hit save. And I'm going to leave it at that for the time being, just to show you how this looks. So when I hit publish, that's then actually going to ask me what I want to do with existing records. So whether to include existing records or just do it for new records. I'm going to hit include existing records. And then that then will automatically enroll those 14 leads that we've already got in that custom view will then be added to this cadence. If we give it a refresh, hopefully we'll see that in just a moment. Again, it takes a second sometimes just to trigger in. Let's see if this is recorded our click just yet. Hasn't just yet. I wonder if it's having a bit of a problem because we're using the temp mailbox. No worries, we can always go into that a little bit later. So we've got our cadence here now, so that should be pulling through in just a moment. There we go. So we can now see our 14 have gone into there. Now, if I create a lead, or in fact, actually, let's come out of our cadence here. Let's go in and look at all leads. And I'm going to pick up a couple of our leads that aren't in the UK. And I'm just going to go in and I'm going to do a mass update. And I'm going to set the country to United Kingdom. And then what we'll see is because I've done that, they're now going to show up in our cadences view. So they are now in that this custom view now includes 17 prospects. They will now automatically be added into that cadence. You can see that's already happened. So they're going to start traveling through that cadence now all automatically. Now, the way I use this, and this is where we get into the autoresponders, this is a great way to deal with new form submissions coming into the system. So let's say somebody fills out a contact us form, they come into the leads module maybe as a new lead. We then want to follow up with that lead with an automatic message to say, hey, thanks for getting in contact with us, we'll follow up shortly. Or maybe we then want a follow-up action in a couple of days' time where we then say, do you want to book a meeting? Here's my calendar. All of this can be done with cadences, so it gives you that control, and using those custom views mean people enter those cadences all automatically without you having to do anything. Now, Next question is, how do we get people out of that cadence? So there's a couple of options here. I'm going to go back into our cadence here, and I'm going to go into our function. Let's see. Bear with me. It's because this cadence is live. Let's correctly create a new cadence. I'll just show you it here. So when we create our cadence, we get these three little dots up here, and we get these unenroll properties. Now, when I click the unenroll properties, I can add reasons why people get unenrolled from the cadence. So it might be that they've done a follow-up criteria. So that might be that they've replied to any email. So any email that they followed up on. So let's say email is replied, anytime, hit save. That will now remove them from the cadence. So if they reply to any of the emails we send them in the cadence, we want to then remove them because we're going to follow up with them manually. But we can also do other things as well. So we can also say, actually, if the record stage, or status, sorry, is the field, status, isn't cold prospect, we want to remove them. So in this instance, we've added anybody that's a cold prospect. As soon as one of them replies to an email, that's going to remove them from the cadence. Or alternatively, if we change their status so they're no longer a cold prospect, again, that will remove them from the cadence. And you can add multiple different properties here. So we've got the lead criteria. We can also do additional follow-up criterias. So that might be a task has been completed. And we can even do, if we want to, on a specific date. Now, the specific date one's really limited because it's like a hard-coded date. It's not a dynamic date. And effectively what it's doing is at this point, we're just going to end this cadence. To be honest, I don't think I've ever found a practical use case for this. I would always do the unenroll based on either the follow-up criteria or the lead criteria. Now, on the follow-up criteria, if you want to be specific, you can specify a specific email. So you can actually say if they've replied to this specific email, then exit them from the criteria. So you can get more specific if you want to. And that is how you manage that in unenrollment. Hopefully that all makes sense. Do we have any more questions before we move on to some of the other features? And I'm just going to have a quick drink and see whilst we get more features come in. I'm also going to check my Apple Note to make sure we have covered everything. So we've covered basic cadences with emails. We've spoken about tasks. We've spoken about exit criteria. We've also spoken about custom view cadences. We've spoken about being able to see the next step in the timeline. So we've got only a couple of things left now, which is great. Mark's asking, with the limit, is that per cadence? Yes, so combined maximum follow-ups per cadence. So yeah, that's 18 follow-ups per cadence if you're on that standard plan. So again, I think the limits are actually pretty generous. The only one I think you'd ever come close to running into is that 18 here on the standard plan. All of the rest I think are really generous. I mean, on the standard plan, you can do 10 active cadences per module. So, you know, the chance of you having 10 different cadences all live for one module at the same time, I think it's pretty unlikely. Particularly if you're on that standard plan. I think if you're at that stage, you probably also want some other more powerful features in Zoho, so you probably have already upgraded for other reasons, I would suspect. Okay, cool. So let's get back into it. So the next thing I want to talk about is WhatsApp. So WhatsApp is only added to Cadences this week, but it's one of those things where Zoho have been slowly adding WhatsApp functionality over time into Zoho CRM. Now, WhatsApp probably isn't for everybody. I tend to find with clients I'm working with, it works better for B2C businesses than it does for B2B businesses. Not necessarily always true, but in most cases I find it is. Now, to set up WhatsApp, there's a couple of caveats. So before we even get to cadences, we need to go in the search bar, in setup, and we're going to go into business messaging. And when we do that, you're going to be able to see all the providers that Zoho integrates for business messaging. Now, this is actually a pretty new area in the settings page. It never used to exist. What you're going to want to do then is hover over the WhatsApp option. You can hit details like it's got online and then integrate. Now, you will need a WhatsApp business account for this to work. You can't do it with a personal WhatsApp account, and you'll need access to your Meta business account to be able to do the connection. When you do that connection, it will ask you for what number from your Meta business account you want to associate. I've created a demo WhatsApp business account here with a number that we don't actually use, just for the purposes of being able to show you this. Now, there is a cost to being able to send messages through WhatsApp. This is additional to your Zoho CRM messages, but they from your Zoho CRM features. The cost here is based on credits. I won't get too much into the credits now. I will send over a link to everybody afterwards because it's a little bit of it's a little bit complicated working out those credits. It's not as simple as 1 credit per message. But I'll send over details on how you manage that. Now, once you have got WhatsApp Business connected, you can then start creating templates. Now, confusingly, to do that, you're going to go into Functions and Actions. And then in here, you'll see along the top bar, you'll see WhatsApp notifications. And you can go in and you can create WhatsApp templates. Now, next caveat, Meta/WhatsApp will have to review and approve all of your templates. You can't just send anything that you want out through WhatsApp. Meta has been really, really tight on this over the years. They've only very recently allowed you to do almost any marketing through WhatsApp. I think part of the reason is they don't want WhatsApp to become a bit like your email inbox, which is full normally of emails that you don't want. I think they're trying to avoid that with WhatsApp. Now, when you create a WhatsApp template, you're going to give it a name. You'll choose which module you're going to associate that template with. So like our cadences, you have to specify the module. You'll select your language, which in our case is English UK, and you'll select your category. Now the category is important because it's what the information that goes to WhatsApp as part of their approval process. So for marketing, for example, these may include welcoming and closing messages, updates, invitations, and things like that. Utility messages are things like, this is an order confirmation, this is a reminder about your upcoming meeting, that kind of thing. Now, when you select and create your template, you can go in and you can use the mail merges exactly as we do for email, where we do the hash and we merge in information. So I can do, hi, first name, you have a meeting with us today, and we'll hit save. That will generate our WhatsApp template, and you'll see in here if they're in review or not. So I created 2 yesterday in preparation for this today. You'll see my marketing one was approved pretty quickly, but actually I made a utility template, and that's actually still in review from yesterday. So that's something to bear in mind. Again, it's obviously because WhatsApp has to do that approval process, there can be delays to how quickly that WhatsApp can be generated. I just see a question in here from Michelle. I'm guessing people we WhatsApp have to be on WhatsApp. Yes. Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I don't know what happens if you try on WhatsApp and they don't have a WhatsApp. I will find out about that. I think certainly in the UK, we just assume everybody has a WhatsApp, don't we? But that's a good question. I don't know the answer on that one, but I will find out and I will let you guys know what happens if they don't have a WhatsApp. My inkling would be that when WhatsApp tries to send the message, you'll just get an error or you'll get an alert to say that they don't have a WhatsApp account. But that's a very good question that I don't know the answer to. Okay, so just going then into our notifications. So once we've got our template, we can then go into notifications, and this is where we set up the notification to use with our template. So we're going to give it a name. So this is going to be, I'm just going to call this marketing demo. It's going to be sent to the lead. We're going to choose the recipient. And when we do this, it's a bit like when we were setting up the email and we'd choose if we were going to use the email or the secondary email. On here, we're going to choose if we're going to use phone or we're going to use mobile, etc. Now, if you're going to go down the WhatsApp route, this would be a reason to make sure you have your sort of ducks in a row when it comes to your fields. A lot of clients I work with and a lot of CRMs I've seen effectively use the phone and mobile field interchangeably. But obviously, if you're going to start doing WhatsApp marketing, you're going to want to make sure you've got the mobile field in the mobile field and the phone in the phone field so that you can make sure you're sending to the right place. Finally, we're going to go in and we're going to select our template. So we're going to do that. You'll notice it only lets me select the marketing template because my other ones haven't been approved. So I have to select this option here. Once I've done that, I'm going to hit save and that creates my notification. Once I have that in place, I can then go back to my cadence, and I can then go into any of the cadences I've created. So I could go into the manual cadence, and I could, if I wanted to, create an additional step in here. So maybe I'm going to remove this one after the meeting is, after my call is completed. I'm going to remove this, and I'm actually going to say after that call is completed, instead, there it is, I'm going to go in and I'm going to add a WhatsApp. And again, you'll see I've got my option of when do I want to do this. So I'm going to do it immediately after the previous task is completed. I can then give it a name. So I'm going to call it a message. Again, I'm going to choose my recipient. So I'm going to choose their mobile. And then I'm going to choose my template. So I'm going to go in there, choose my template, and hit save. And that's going to then add it into my cadence as if it, as if it was an email, as if it was a task. It works in the same way. I can then also go in, and if I want, I can do a follow-up action. So I might do an email action. The only downside with the WhatsApp right now is that all you've really got in here is after it's been delivered or after it's been failed. There's no sort of after somebody's opened it, somebody's read it. It's not as sophisticated as that right now. It's purely delivered or failed. I guess actually back to Michelle's question, I've probably answered it here. If it fails, what you could do within the cadence is set up a separate chain. So maybe it tries to send them a WhatsApp message. If the WhatsApp message is successful, it then continues down one flow. If it's unsuccessful, it goes down a different flow. That might be one of the ways you could manage this. So we've got that in there, and I'm going to hit save on that. And that's kind of the WhatsApp integration. It's relatively straightforward, provided you fit into those caveats that you have a WhatsApp business account, you have templates that are approved by WhatsApp, and you're not spamming people. It's a nice thing to integrate into your flow. One of the things I'm going to be looking at for our own CRM is using it as meeting reminders. Whenever we do, many people will know probably on this call, if we're booking meetings with clients or prospects, we'll send out a Zoho booking link. And when people fill out that Zoho booking link, they enter their first name, last name, company name, email, and phone. Now, currently, we're not doing anything really with that phone information other than it's useful then if that person phones us that we know who they are. But what we want to do is have it so that actually we're setting up reminders and follow-ups that are using that phone number, just so we can make sure people are turning up to meetings, make sure they're properly informed and things like that. So building it into the other things that we're doing. If, for example, I know I've got another client on this meeting that does like site visits and things like that, where they're installing their products. This might be a way that potentially when you've got a site visit booked, as well as it sending an email to remind somebody that you're coming to their home today to install whatever it is, maybe it also sends out a WhatsApp message automatically just as a reminder and things like that. So you can build it into other areas of the business. And you can also, I mean, we're focused on cadences today, but in a more traditional sort of automation sense, you can also set up just a basic workflow. So I could also go into workflows and say, okay, when a deal is close one, I'm going to go in there. So the record action is, let's do, yeah, record action is created or edited, and the stage is one. I can then go in here, notify, and send a WhatsApp message. So I don't have to do it exclusively in cadences. I can use WhatsApp in other parts of the system as well. So it just gives you that bit of flexibility. Speaking of the client I just referenced, is there a way to include an add to calendar link in the message so that a customer can add the survey visit to their personal calendar? Oh, that's a really, really good question. My own clients are challenging me the most on this call. It's a really interesting question. I don't know. I would suspect we can because it's just a sort of standardized bit of information, a calendar link. I've not done it, but we can certainly look into that. I'll have a conversation with you separately, Dave, and we can see if we can get that up and running for you. But I suspect so. I know certainly in the instance if you were to use Zoho bookings where customers can book their visit, which I know, again, in your case is not what you're doing, but if you were doing that, then you can do that from Zoho bookings. Because you're doing it in a different way, we might have to have a look at it, but I suspect you probably can, yeah. Okay, so let's just have a quick look in my list and make sure we've covered everything. So we've spoken about WhatsApp. So last two topics, I want to touch on the reporting for cadences, which is obviously super critical to know, are your cadences working? So I'm going to come out of our workflow rule here. I'm going to go back to our settings and go back to cadences. And I'm going to go in, I've got my different cadences here. And if I mouse over, you can see this helpful button for view reports. People often miss this because they think they go into the lead, open the lead, and then view the report that way, which I understand why people do that. It's just a little bit confusing. You actually have to go into the cadence and then view report. And that's going to give you this kind of breakdown here. And this can be filtered. So this is showing you all time now, but you can filter it by last 7 days. That will give you then a breakdown of for email 1, what's been done. I can also go into email 2, total tasks, calls, and WhatsApps, and I can see the history and the deliverability. Now, more importantly than this view here, I think, is actually this button up here that says Show Funnel. If I click this, it gives me what I think is actually a really great view of the overall cadence. So this shows me, okay, for step 1, 3 people have opened, 2 people have bounced. I can then see step 2, where people are at in the cadence. Now, we haven't had people run through this cadence completely yet, so currently step 2 is empty, but it gives you that number then per step. And you can see for WhatsApp, it'll give you the delivered versus failed. For the follow-up task, it'll give you the completed versus the open. And I think it's a really, really useful report to be able to get an overview of what's happened with your cadence. It's also just a quite nice report to look at, actually. It's quite satisfying when you've got a lot of data in it and you can see it all come together and you can see the different flows. It also makes it really easy to pinpoint where you might need to improve some of your email communication, where you might see a drop off or something like that. It's really easy to identify in this view. Now you can, from within the lead, if I go to cadences, I can always see some information about the cadence here. So I can see if somebody's in the cadence, I can see the last follow-up reason, and I can see the next follow-up action. As I said earlier, you can also go into the timeline and see what the next action is going to be as well, which is really helpful. But you don't get too much more than that. If I click into the cadence name, it's just going to give me a list of the actions that were in there and the completed. Again, there's only one in here right now, but if there was more, you would see that complete list. And again, from the emails point of view, any emails that are sent out will automatically show up in the email section as well. That kind of gives you the reporting. Obviously, if we'd sent some WhatsApp and booked some calls and things like that, you would see that in here as well. The final thing I wanted to go over with you was a little bit of a pro tip, and I'm going to actually reference Zanata Consulting, who is a Zoho consultancy over in the US that does some pretty excellent YouTube videos actually, where they cover a lot of Zoho stuff. So I'm sure a lot of you have probably seen their stuff because they come up on YouTube all the time. But something they pointed out, which is very, very true and is a really useful feature, is if you go into workflows, and we use this for clients all the time, but when you combine it with cadences, it's really powerful, and you create a workflow. Now, you'd think you'd go into leads if you want to create a workflow based on lead emails, but if you scroll down, you've actually got a separate tab in here for email. And I can give this a name, so I'm going to call it demo email. I can hit next. What this allows you to do is trigger automations based on incoming and outgoing emails. So in our case, within the cadence, we've got outgoing email. So I'm going to select outgoing email is sent. Or in fact, I could change that. So I could say if an outgoing email is replied to. And then what I can do is set conditions. So I can say only do this if the email subject, which is in here somewhere, is, if we just scroll back into ChatGPT here, let's get that first one here. Any thoughts on unlocking the potential? Oh, where's the first one? There it is, sorry. So I'm going to copy that into here. There we go. So I'm going to say, okay, if an email reply comes in, and then the replies for an email with the subject unlock Zoho's full potential, what I can then do is that I can then trigger additional automations that you can't do within the cadence itself. So this might be, I want to reassign the owner of the lead. So in some use cases, so for example, if you're in a sales environment where you have people that are specifically doing cold outreach, and then once they get a bite, they're passed then onto a new salesperson. This is where you might then have an automation that says, okay, this person's replied, so we're going to reassign this lead to a more senior salesperson who's then going to go through and close the deal. We can also do notifications, we can also raise tasks, but more importantly, we can do custom functions and we can do field updates. So we can actually update the lead. And one of the most common things I do here is I actually go in and update the lead status. So I'm going to name this field update. I'm going to go into status and I'm going to update the status from cold prospect to, in my case, I'm going to say initial awareness. So what I've done here is I've set up a workflow rule that if somebody replies to my first email that I sent out, it's going to update the lead status to move them out of cold prospect and into the next stage. That then combined with the exit criteria that I set up a while ago will then mean they're removed from the cadence because effectively we've sort of hooked them, I guess, and they're now moving forward in the sales process. Just reading through some comments a moment. If someone clicks on, say, contact us in an email, will this show as a lead source? They will have come in as a lead, say PPC. But if these cadence help convert, it'd be good to see them in the lead source. Good question there from Dave. So what I would do there is I would probably leave the initial lead source as PPC because that's where they initially came through. However, from a reporting point of view, we can always see when a lead has gone through the cadence. And in fact, we can pull this information into analytics as well. So we can say, actually, this lead initially came through from PPC. It went cold in the system for 6 months. Then we put it into this cadence and then it was sort of reactivated and then it moved forward. We could even, if we wanted to, much like I've shown here where we do a field update, we could have it that when it enters the cadence, it checks a box on the lead to say this lead has entered this cadence, or however we want to do it. And that way it becomes really easy for reporting then to see what's happened with that lead. That does give me an idea though. So one of the ways we might do this, I'm going to build off of Dave's question here. So let's say we did want to use cadences to kind of reactivate or re-warm up leads that have previously come into the system. What I can do is I can go into create a new view and I'm going to go in and I'm going to do cold and inactive leads. And what I can then do is I'm going to say, okay, well the status is cold, but actually it's not just the status being cold we're interested in. We're also interested in when was the last activity time? When was the last time something happened with this lead? And I'm going to say it was, let's say, previous year. You can do whatever filter you wanted to. I'll do previous year and hit save. I'll give it a name. Oh, I've put special characters in the name. There we go. Hit save. And that's then going to give me my custom list then of leads that are in cold prospect that have been inactive since last year. And what I could then do is I could use this custom view as the trigger to enter a cadence. So if somebody sat in the system for over a year, they're inactive, then we're going to pop them into this cadence and we're going to try to re-engage them and re-warm them up. And that would be quite a good use case of cadences. I can see we've got another question as well. Can cadences be used for new accounts or contacts, or is this designed to be used for leads only? No, but good question. So cadences, I use them most for leads, definitely, because they're great for doing sort of like warm-up activities and cold outreach. But you can use cadences across the system. Other use cases of a cadence might be that if a deal goes cold, you might enter somebody into a cadence to kind of re-engage that deal. If a deal is won, for example, you might use a cadence to kind of do like an onboarding sequence about your product or your service. If it's a new contact within an existing account, you could have a cadence that kind of gives them an introduction to who you are. There's lots of different options in there. And as I say, if you want to, you can make those emails look like glossy marketing emails if you want when you're in the template builder. I tend to find they work better when they look more like they're handwritten and more personal, though. So that's generally my recommendation. Perfect. And let me just check my list. I think that means we have covered pretty much everything on the session today. So we've gone from setting up a basic cadence, setting up different email triggers, using an automatic cadence. We've used some workflow rules on how to get more out of those cadences, and we've covered the WhatsApp and the reporting side of things. Does anybody have any more questions on the subject? We have about 20 minutes, so we have plenty of time for questions or if people have any thoughts or sort of ideas they want me to run through. to give people a minute to ask questions so I can have a drink. It looks like we might be all out of questions, which hopefully means it's been a really helpful session and now everybody's going to go away and build their own cadences. I think a lot of what you do with cadences is actually getting the emails right as well. So once you've built the cadence, make sure you're checking in on that reporting. Make sure you're looking to see where are people dropping off from this sequence, where are they not engaging. So then you can refine and build up that cadence over time. I think that's everything for today. This session has been recorded, so I will upload it in the next couple of hours and share it with everybody. If you have any questions after this, just drop me an email, or if you pop a comment in now, I will follow up with you. When you do leave, you'll be redirected to the sign up page for our next webinar, which will be our overview of the September updates that have come to Zoho. Some of that will be a little bit touching on the cadence updates, but there's also been some other really cool updates this month, including some news from Zoholics, which ran in the UK last week that I want to show off to people as well. So please do sign up for that. But yeah, as I say, if you have any other questions, I'll hang around for a couple of minutes to answer them. But otherwise, have a great rest of your day and enjoy the weekend, everybody.